I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. Donald Trump continues to post vile lies and despicable messages on his social media platform. I want to call out the lies that he's spreading because large media networks are not going to do it. And I want to call out the fact that Donald Trump's conduct in attacking prosecutors like Special Counsel Jack Smith and lying about the findings of other prosecutors is beneath contempt. So let's talk about it. Here's one of Donald Trump's posts. He writes, Jack Smith and the Special Prosecutor's Office are playing the same games with election interference and fake prosecutions as James Comey, only far more obvious. The DOJ must end this charade right now, and that goes to their use of DAs and AGs in Atlanta and New York. Then he writes, MAGA, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, in addition to the fact that it's like a barely comprehensible statement and just random use of the word MAGA with exclamation points and just filled with complete lies here, where he says that the DOJ is using the DAs in New York and the AGs in New York and Atlanta. It is just complete and utter BS. Again, I mean, threatening and attacking the prosecutor here is conduct that is just utterly despicable. Oh, and by the way, James Comey, who I know Donald Trump's rhino this, rhino that. By the way, Donald Trump calls Bill Barr. Bill Barr, who Donald Trump calls a rhino, is the one who hired John Durham. I'll talk about that in a moment. Who hired John Durham and then appointed John Durham to be a special counsel, to be a special prosecutor, solely so that Donald Trump could attack his political enemies. And after all of that, Donald Trump calls Bill Barr a rhino. Let's go on to the next post that Donald Trump makes. He goes, so proud to have fired James Comey. Instinct. Well, you basically fired or people resigned. Like everybody, you either fired or they resigned. And so all of the people who you said were the best, they either left and they left because they realized that you were a traitor, or you fired them. And so, no, you don't hire the best people. You actually hire the worst people because, in your own words, every single person you hired, you claim didn't know what they were doing. Now he's talking about the Durham report that was released on Monday. And by the way, even though the Durham report itself recommends nothing systemically, it has no overhaul of the FBI, it recommends no further prosecutions of anybody. In fact, the only two trials that Durham actually tried, the Sussman and Dichenko trials, not only did he lose, he lost in like miserable fashion, where the jury verdicts almost instantaneously found the individuals not guilty. That was actually a witch hunt investigation. And when evidence was presented in actual federal courts of law, all of the Trump conspiracies were rejected soundly by the juries in those cases. He goes, Congress must do something about this. Must never happen again. What is it that you are referring to? You literally weaponized the DOJ and had a special prosecutor go out and attack your political enemies. And after all of that, lost the only two trials that actually took place in connection with his investigation. Then Donald Trump writes treason. And then Donald Trump writes the crime of the century. Now, if it was the crime of the century, then why wouldn't John Durham prosecute the crime? Why wouldn't he recommend that the crime of the century be prosecuted? Because it wasn't a crime of the century. It was beneath a nothing burger. And if you actually go to John Durham's 306-page report, which is frankly utterly embarrassing and humiliating to read, what he says in his report is, It looks like the FBI may have acted too cavalierly in investigating the allegations against Donald Trump about Russia collusion. The report on page 18 goes, our investigation also revealed that senior FBI personnel displayed a serious lack of analytical rigor towards the information that they received, especially information received from politically affiliated persons and entities. And then it doesn't even recommend anything significant with the FBI. So no, there's no crime of the century. How do I know that? Because if there was, he'd put it in the report. But of course, it's not in the report. Remember all the MAGA Republicans saying, oh, it's the crime of the century. There's going to be bombshell indictments. No, there wasn't. No, there wasn't. And the two trials they did, they absolutely lost. Here's Donald Trump's next post because they just lie about everything. Everything is a lie. They can't actually reflect what's in the Durham Report itself, which again was created solely to attack Trump's political enemies. So from the outset, the document, the mandate from Bill Barr was go after Trump's enemies. And it's the weakest thing they could possibly have put forward, knowing that was their mandate. Trump writes, the Durham Report spells out in great detail the Democrat hoax that was perpetrated upon me and the American people. No, it doesn't. This is 2020 presidential election fraud, just like, quote, stuffing the ballot boxes, only more so. This totally illegal act had huge impact on the election. With an honest media, we are looking at the crime of the century. Again, if it was the crime of the century, they would put it in the report. And you want to know what actually manipulated the media? You want to know what was actual interference? It was when James Comey, who you say you were glad you fired, broke all protocol with the FBI, broke all Department of Justice norms, and announced that he was investigating Hillary Clinton right before the election. That's actually what went against the norms, not when you don't need a great deal of analytical rigor when you're out there saying, Russia, if you are listening, find me Hillary Clinton's emails. If you're listening, Russia, do it. Okay, we can hear it for ourselves. Oh, and one of the other things about the Durham Report, it said it found confirmation bias in the FBI. Really, confirmation bias. Let's look at the data. Paul Manafort, Donald Trump's campaign manager, guilty. Rick Gates, guilty. Mike Flynn, the head of the the NSA advisor, the National Security Advisor, the head of all national security, guilty. Pled guilty. Donald Trump pardoned him. George Papadopoulos, guilty. Roger Stone, guilty. Konstantin Kilmanek, wanted, a $250,000 reward. Guilty, 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 guilty. I could go on and name you others in Trump's orbit who were guilty from the actual investigation that found crimes with all these people pleading guilty. On the other hand, you want to go look at what Durham did. Michael Sussman, not guilty. Igor Danchenko, not guilty. Juries found them not guilty almost instantaneously. And so you're talking about confirmation bias there. You know who said it great? Let me show you Democratic Congress member Jim McGovern when he's questioning Andy Biggs at a hearing earlier in the day. And this yesterday, this is what Jim McGovern said to Andy Biggs. Like, can we talk about the actual individuals who were found guilty? And by the way, Andy Biggs, did you get that Durham report before we got to look at it? Here, play this clip.
I get where you're coming from, but let's also talk about the Durham report that just came out today.
Yeah, all right.
So, and let's talk about this as what it is. It's a package of bills that deal with federal and local law enforcement. But it didn't deal with it the way you wanted, so now it's the January 6th issue. So I get it. That's all you got. So go ahead. Yeah. Hang your hat on that.
Yeah, you guys made this decision, by the way, before the Durham report came out. I mean, you noticed this bill last week. I don't know whether you had an advanced copy of the Durham report, but I think the Durham report was a colossal waste of money. But let me just point out for the record, since you brought it up, federal prosecutors have secured convictions or confessions from Trump's campaign manager, deputy campaign manager, fundraiser, chief strategist, national security advisor, 2 foreign policy advisors, his personal lawyer, and his accountant. And Trump has been charged with 34 felony counts, and a jury of his peers said that he is a sexual abuser. Special Counsel Mueller issued 25 indictments against Russian nationals who attempted to undermine the 2016 election at the orders of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And I did a cursory reading of the Durham Report online. I don't see any indictments. I think a number of you were saying there'd be multiple indictments. I don't know, did I miss something? Were there indictments?
Well, I don't know who said there'd be multiple indictments, but what I do...
Mr. Radcliffe, who was a former colleague who served in the
but I was just,
administration, said lots of indictments.
Well, I can't speak for Mr. Radcliffe, but I can tell you that trying to get an indictment out of Merrick Garland is going to be pretty darn hard unless you're a Republican.
And by the way, McGovern is so right there, because let's focus on evidence. Let's focus on what happens in a court of law. MAGA Republicans exist outside of the judicial process, right? Donald Trump was too big of a coward to even show up at the E. Jean Carroll case. Why? Because they don't live in a world of evidence. They're scared of evidence. So he flees to Scotland, he flees to Ireland, and then he claims, oh, the legal system is treating us unfairly. Look, Durham could have went through a fact-based, evidence-based approach. If he found crimes, he could have recommended the crimes of the century be prosecuted, shown the data supporting those crimes, and ultimately, if they were not prosecuted, then that could actually be a scandal. Why weren't they prosecuted? He found the evidence. He found the smoking guns. But he didn't, because if he did, it would be in the report. He would recommend criminal indictments take place. In fact, the only thing that he did find, the only criminal conduct that he did find that was taking place was Italian intelligence officials had told him that they were aware of Donald Trump's financial crimes and that they had information about financial misconduct that you were engaged in overseas. But guess what? Bill Barr and John Durham covered that up, but they used that as pretext to tell the media that they were investigating crimes, and they led the media to believe that the crimes that they were investigating were Democratic officials, when in fact they were covering up and quashing the criminal investigation into you, Donald Trump, because that is what these MAGA Republicans are doing here. And by the way, MAGA Republicans exist in a world of fake whistleblowers, right? Remember when James Comer last week and the week before that, it seems like every week we've got a whistleblower. The whistleblower is going to come forward. The whistleblower is has the goods on President Biden. Get ready for the whistleblower. Again, just like Durham, all freaking lies. This is James Comer this weekend when he went on Maria Bartiromo and said the whistleblower is missing. Play this clip.
Hold on a second, Congressman. Did you just say that the whistleblower or the informant is now missing?
Well, we're hopeful that we could find the informant. Now, remember, these informants are kind of in the spy business.
And by the way, this is MAGA Republican Tim Burchett, he's the MAGA Republican Congress member from Tennessee, remember, who was like, there's nothing Congress can do about gun control. There's nothing we can do to take weapons of war off the street. We just have to let it happen, and we need to give people our thoughts and prayers. That's all that we can do. We just got to pray. There's nothing we can do as members of Congress. That's like word for word what he said. And this is what he said about the missing whistleblower that was supposed to have all this information on President Biden. Play this clip.
Do you know the whereabouts of the informant?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Is he missing?
Apparently, yes. According to Chairman Comer,
This is who they are. They're not in a fact-based, data-based, objective world. They are in a world of gaslighting and rely on the media to perpetuate those lies and the gaslighting. Oh, and by the way, this is what Trump said also on his social media platform. He goes, Bushy rhino Mark Thiessen, who is willing to misrepresent facts in order to have his Bush supporter help his friend DeSantis start gaining in the polls. He's dropping like a rock, said that Trump lost Iowa last time around. Actually, I won big, but there's nobody at Fox News who wants to correct these false statements, of which there are many. This reminds me of 2016 all over again, he says, and you're missing the point. What Mark Thiessen actually said, and by the way, Mark Thiessen made a bunch of absurd points as well about Ron DeSantis. I'm not trying to give Mark Thiessen credit here, because Thiessen said that what makes DeSantis great is how he goes after the woke. What in the world are you talking about? But by the way, what Thiessen was referring to is that Ted Cruz won in Iowa in the Republican primary, that you lost the Iowa primary. Why don't you just get the data straight? Here's the data right here. Folks, It is so important right now that every time they lie, every time they try to misrepresent what the Durham Report is and all of this stuff, know that it is gaslighting. Know that it is a psyop that they are pursuing to try to spread lies, to spread disinformation, to change public perception with the lies. If there was truly the crime of the century, they would have filed the crime. They would have brought criminal charges. He was empowered to do that as a special counsel. He could make recommendations. He could pursue these criminal charges. Durham didn't do that. He tried 2 cases. He lost 2 cases. 0 for 2. You want to talk about the Mueller investigation? All those individuals, Manafort, Gates, Flynn, Papadopoulos, Stone, guilty. I can name you far more people, but you get the point. Evidence, court of law and order matters. Donald Trump, the modern day MAGA Republicans, completely lawless. We're going to call it out at each and every turn. Thank you for watching. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit subscribe. We're on our way to 1.5 million subscribers thanks to your awesome support. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. And finally, wherever you get audio podcasts, subscribe to the MeidasTouch podcast. We got a great episode we just did. All right, hit subscribe on this YouTube. It's free. Have a great day.
Hey Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.